Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For this tutorial, I wanted to do something very bold. I wanted to do a very eye-catching color, so I decided to do purples. I did a purple marble technique on the bottom tier, and I did gold stencil on the top. I'm going to show you how my simplest way to do a gold stencil, and then I added some fans and some florals. So let's get going. This cake is one of my very well used Franken cakes. It is cake in there, or it was. It's been around for a while. It's been in the fridge, and I have used it and reused it, and it's just the perfect size. So as long as it will let me, I'm going to keep using this cake to show you these techniques. And what I'm doing is I'm just doing a finishing coat of ganache on top. For this top tier, I wanted a tall, narrow tier. I wanted the whole thing to be tall and narrow. So I just added a few more layers of cake onto the bottom that had already been used. And I'm just covering both tiers with a chocolate ganache. I like the ganache for the tall tiers, especially because it gives you that extra support that a tall tier might need. And if you were to be stacking those cakes, I would put some dowels halfway up, some dowels and a cake board in the middle so that you have some extra support in those tall tiers. Now I'm using, this is just the purple by Satin Ice. It's just the perfect shade of purple that I wanted to use, so I didn't add anything to this. The top tier is just, I used a wrap technique or paneling for the top and the bottom tier. That's my go-to. And to do this, I just cut out a circle for the top, measured the height and the circumference of the cake. This is for the top one. And I cut the piece according to size. Left a little bit of length on the top and on the width. And these are the colors that I'm working with. I did cut out another piece for the top of the bottom tier, and I'm sure you saw me do that, and I set that to the side. Now all of those are firming up to the side because it's so much easier to do a fondant wrap on a cake when your fondant has had time to firm up. A good half hour is typically about the right amount of time. So for this marbling technique, I'm just rolling out logs of the different colors. The paler purple is the same purple, I just added white to it. Then I used some teal and some pink. I'm telling you, I'm going vibrant with my colors here. I don't normally do this, but yeah, I just needed some excitement in my life, I guess. And I'm just rolling them together and just kind of going for a more bold, way less blended marbling on this one. And I'm just rolling it into a ball because my original thought was I was going to cut it sliced and then stick them together, but I had marbled it a little too much for that to actually make sense. The marbling was going to be too worked in, too many marbled lines. So I just kind of left them as they were and just rolled them out that way. And it was perfect, but I wanted the lines to go kind of more diagonal, but not exactly horizontal or vertical. I kind of wanted it at an angle a little bit. So that's why I'm cutting it more at an angle there. I did have it rolled out long enough and tall enough that I could do that without wasting. So I set that piece to the side also. And to do the stenciling, this is my favorite way to do gold stenciling. I just put a little bit of shortening on the back of the stencil. I had taped off the pieces that I didn't want to use because I wanted to do this on the top and the bottom. So I just kind of rolled it on the fondant to get it to stick. And then I'm just using Everclear, brushing it on there, and then just dry dusting the gold luster on top of that. And I typically do this in 2 coats. The first coat gets you almost complete coverage, but then go back in where you started with a little bit more of the luster dust, and it's kind of buffing it shinier, if that makes sense. See here, I went back and I added another little thin coat of it over the top. And then you just take your stencil off and boom, it's done. It's kind of like airbrushing. It's the same effect as airbrushing with gold luster dust mixed with Everclear or vodka or whatever you like to mix it with, and airbrushing a stencil, but it's way less messy. And you're kind of doing it in 2 parts instead of mixing the alcohol and the gold luster dust together. And I find that it gets you a way more precise finished look when I do it this way. I'm just cutting off the extra off of that disc of fondant that I had put on the top, turned it upside down, and then I lifted the marbled fondant onto the cake. There's a thin coating of shortening for the fondant to stick to. Instead of using water or a simple syrup, I like to be able to move my fondant where I need it to be. And with the shortening, you're just less committed. It does stick and adhere and stay over time. And then I'm doing the same thing on the top tier. Now, when I overlap my pieces of fondant that have been wrapped around, I want to point that out, I'm just using some acetate to help me lift it onto the cake. So you do have to turn it upside down onto the acetate. So when you lift it up and place it onto the cake, it's right side out. I hope that makes sense too. So when I put it onto the cake, I just cut a line through both pieces of the extra, or where it's wrapped around on top of itself, and then remove the excess that way. Now, since this cake does not need supports because it's so dried out, you didn't see me add any dowels in there, but typically you would need to put some dowels into your cake so that it supports the top tier. And then I'm accentuating the marble with some more of the gold paint. Same thing, gold luster dust and Everclear. And I'm just finding lines, and here where the 2 pieces meet up, I'm just kind of trying to blend them in together and kind of doing the illusion of lines that go through it, so you don't notice that there's a separation there so much. And then when I lifted put the top tier on here, I kind of tried to hold it so that I wasn't touching those leaves, because it will rub off or it will smudge, especially when you have a color that's so deep and rich, you're going to see the contrast. So just if you have to touch that top tier, touch it where the gold is not. Then after I did that, I put it in the fridge while I arranged my flowers. So these are all artificial flowers. And what I'm trying to do is I want them to be very bold, a bold statement in 2 separate places. So I'm trying to make sure that I have longer pieces of floral that kind of stick out and kind of give it that triangular shape that I've talked about in other videos. The flowers are kind of in a triangle. I don't know if you can see that there, with the point of the triangle being in towards the cake. And I just wrapped them together with floral tape is how I did that. And the same thing on the top. I'm just kind of pushing it in there a little further. And you can, when you wrap your floral bunches, make sure that you leave enough of the stem sticking out so that you can move those floral pieces around to kind of fill in some holes and just kind of redirect where they are so that it visually looks better. It's easier sometimes to do that once it's on the cake, because then you can see where it needs to fill in. But if you wrap them too tightly, you're just going to be stuck with just a tight bunch of flowers, and you're not going to be able to do anything with those. So after I had those placed in, and those fans, they're just paper. They came with a set of gold spheres that I had purchased, and I thought it was a perfect touch in there. But you can make those with wafer paper, and I have done that in another video. I'll try to remember to tag that video if you want to make them completely edible. But to add this sheen, I'm just using a clothes steamer, and that just gets rid of any cornstarch that might be remaining, and it brightens it up. Now that shine will last for a little while, but it's not going to last forever, but at least it won't be kind of that dry look to it. So I hope you like this very bright and bold marbled cake. I had a really good time doing it. It was kind of a nice departure from the typical videos that I do. So I hope you got something, hope you learned something, and we'll catch you on the next one.